Marvin Redpost, written by Louis Sachar. Chapter 1, Royal Blood. The End. Marvin Redpost put down his pencil. He was the first one done. He took his report to Mrs. North. Miss North looked at it. "I can't read this," she said. He had to copy it over. "Neither this time, Marvin," said Mrs. North. Marvin frowned. He was in the 3rd grade. His class had been learning cursive writing. "It's because I'm left-handed," Marvin complained. "It's impossible to write neatly when you're left-handed. Everything is backwards." "I'm left-handed," said Mrs. North. "Oh," said Marvin. "We're lucky to be left-handed," said Mrs. North. "It means we have royal blood." She smiled at him. "You'd write neater if you slowed down," she said. "It isn't a race." He returned to his seat. He picked up his pencil and wrote as fast as he could. He had to write twice as fast this time, just to catch up with everyone else. He had to write a report on something he read in Current Events. Current Events was a newspaper for children. This is what Marvin wrote. "The king of Champagne is looking for his lost son. The son's name is Prince Robert. Prince Robert was kidnapped the day he was born. That was 9 years ago. Prince Robert is 9 years old. He has red hair and blue eyes, unless he's dead. The king is going all around the world looking for his lost son. He hopes he isn't dead. So do I. This week, the king is in Washington, D.C." Marvin finished writing just as the bell rang for recess. He gave his report to Mrs. North, then ran outside to play wall ball. Marvin was 9 years old. He had red hair. He had blue eyes. He lived in a small town, not too far from Washington, D.C. Chapter 2. You Can Do Anything. Marvin had 2 best friends, Stuart Albright and Nick Tuffle. After school, they all went to Stuart's house. "Put your dog outside," said Nick. Nick was brave. He once rode his bike full speed down Suicide Hill, but he was afraid of Fluffy, Stuart's little white dog. Marvin patted Fluffy. "Careful, he's going to bite you," said Nick. Fluffy growled at Nick. "He's a good dog," said Marvin. Fluffy licked Marvin's fingers. Stuart put Fluffy outside. "Where'd you get that stupid dog?" asked Nick. "Fluffy's not stupid," said Stuart. "He's too," said Nick. "He looks like a rat that ran through a cotton candy machine." "We got him at the pound," said Stuart. "I picked him out myself." "Well, you picked the wrong dog," said Nick. "I did not." "Did too." Marvin was afraid they'd get into a fight. Nick and Stuart were always getting into fights. "I think my parents picked the wrong baby," Marvin said. "Huh?" asked Nick. "What?" said Stuart. "At the hospital," said Marvin. "They took the wrong baby home. They're not really my parents." He had been thinking about this all day. He didn't really believe it. He just wanted to keep his best friends from fighting. "I was kidnapped the day I was born," said Marvin. "You're Prince Robert," exclaimed Stuart. Stuart was smart. It sometimes amazed Marvin how quickly he caught on to things. "Say what?" asked Nick. "Marvin's parents are really the king and queen of Champagne." Stuart explained. Wait a second, said Nick. Mr. and Mrs. Redpost? No way. No, said Stuart. Don't you remember what we read in current events? The prince was kidnapped at birth. So, said Nick. So, Marvin is really Prince Robert, said Stuart. Say what? Said Nick. I have red hair and blue eyes, said Marvin. Everyone else in my family has brown hair and brown eyes, and I'm left-handed. That means I have royal blood. Wait a second, said Nick. If your parents are the king and queen of Champagne, then how did you end up in the hospital here? Marvin thought a moment. He hadn't figured that part out. Simple, said Stuart. The kidnappers had to hide the baby somewhere. Well, what better place to hide a baby than with a bunch of other babies in a hospital? That's right, said Marvin. Or, said Stuart, maybe your parents didn't get you at the hospital. Maybe you're adopted. They just haven't told you. I bet you that's it, said Nick. The kidnappers left you in a garage bin. Then a policeman found you and took you to an orphanage. And then Mr. and Mrs. Redpost adopted you. Or else, Stuart whispered, Mr. and Mrs. Redpost might be the kidnappers. You get to live in a castle, said Nick. And you'll have 100 servants. You'll never have to make your bed again. Marvin shrugged. You'll have so much money, said Nick. You could buy anything you want. You walk into a store, you see something you want, you just buy it. You could buy a car. Marvin laughed. I'm too young to drive, he said. Duh, said Nick. No one's going to give the prince a ticket. You can do anything. Darn, I wish I had red hair and blue eyes. You're so lucky, Marvin. Man, some people have all the luck. I'm not lucky, Marvin reminded him. I was unlucky to be kidnapped. We just have to figure out a way to tell the king, said Stuart. And you can't let your parents know. If they're the kidnappers, they'll kill you for sure. Chapter 3. Marvin Sees the King. Marvin Redpost lived in a gray house. There was a fence around the house. The fence was all white except for one red post. He slapped the red post as he walked through the gate. He had an older brother, Jacob, who was 11, and a younger sister, Lindsay, who was 4. Jacob met him at the front door. Watch out, Mar, he said. Mom's mad. I'm not mad, said their mother, coming up behind him. She sounded mad. Go clean your room, she told Jacob. I already cleaned my room, said Jacob. Clean it again, she said. Then help Lindsay with hers. Jacob was right. She was mad. And where have you been? She asked Marvin. At Stuart's, he said. Grandma and Grandpa are coming over. I forgot. You should have called, said his mother. You didn't tell me you were going to Stuart's house. I had no idea where you are. I always go to Stuart's or Nick's, said Marvin. You're supposed to call, said his mother. You could have been kidnapped, for all I knew. Okay, I'm sorry, said Marvin. He went upstairs to his room. I was kidnapped, for all you know, he muttered to himself. He wondered if his mother would say that if she was really a kidnapper. Probably not. I want you to do your homework, his mother yelled up to him, before Grandma and Grandpa get here. Okay, Marvin muttered. Marvin had a pet lizard named General Jackson. General Jackson lived in a glass cage next to Marvin's desk. She probably has no idea. I'm Prince Robert, Marvin told the general. If she did, she wouldn't yell at me. She'd serve me breakfast in bed every morning. General Jackson stuck out his tongue. For homework, Marvin had to practice his handwriting. He wrote as fast as he could. If I was a prince, he said, I wouldn't have to do homework. A servant would do it for me. He finished his homework, then walked downstairs. His grandparents still had not arrived. His father was watching television in the den. Dad, said Marvin, was I adopted? What? No, of course not. Would you tell me if I was? Yes, but you weren't. Marvin rubbed his chin. His father seemed to be telling the truth. What happened when I was born? He asked. What? Did anything unusual happen? His father looked away from the television. It seems there was something, he said. I forget what it was, but it was a false alarm. You are fine. He turned back to the television. Did they take me away? Asked Marvin. Or was I with Mom every single second? His father sighed. No, you weren't with Mom every single second. Can we please talk about this later? I'm trying to watch the news. Well, when I came back, said Marvin. Did I look different? What? Okay, said Marvin. Like 3 days after I was born, did I look exactly the same as the day I was born? I don't remember. Probably not. Babies change quickly. What did I look like when I was born? You looked like a baby. All babies look pretty much the same. Now, please, Marvin, I want to watch this. The doorbell rang. Marvin heard his grandparents enter. His father got up. Come on, Mar, he said. But now Marvin was watching TV. The king of Shampoo was on the news. The king had wavy red hair underneath his gold crown. I don't know if my son is alive or dead, said the king. Except he spoke with a strange accent, so it sounded like, I don't know if my son is alive or dead. The king's face filled the TV screen. He spoke. Robert, if you are listening out there, please call me. Return to your rightful place on the throne. We need you. Your kingdom awaits you. Except it sounded like, we need you. Your kingdom awaits you. The newsman came on. If you think you may know someone who is Prince Robert, you should. The television shut off. Mr. Redpost put down the remote control switch. Let's not keep Grandma and Grandpa waiting, he said. Marvin's grandparents were making a big fuss over Lindsay. You're so pretty, Lindsay, said his grandmother. You look more and more like your mother every day. And Jacob, you are the spitting image of your father. How do I look like, Grandma? Asked Marvin. His grandmother smiled at him. You look like... She stopped and thought a moment. You look like both your parents, she said. But Marvin knew she was just saying that. She really meant he didn't look like either of them. He knew whom he looked like. He had just seen his face on television. He looked like the king of Shampoo. Chapter 4 Marvin Redpost is dead. Are you really the lost prince of Champagne? Judy Jasper asked Marvin as he walked into class. What? Asked Marvin. I don't think so, he muttered. Nick said you were, said Melanie. Travis and Kenny hurried over. Nick said, you're the lost prince of Champagne, said Kenny. Is that true? Asked Travis. Before Marvin could answer, someone shoved him. It was Clarence. You're not a prince, said Clarence. Clarence was the meanest kid in Marvin's class. I didn't say I was, said Marvin. You shouldn't push up Prince Clarence, said Judy. He will throw you in the dungeon. That's right, said Melanie. You're in big trouble, Clarence, said Travis. I'm not scared, said Clarence. Nick put his arm around Marvin. Hey, everybody, he said. This is my best friend, Prince Robert. Marvin took his seat. He wished Nick hadn't told everybody he was Prince Robert. Casey Appleton sat down next to him. Good morning, King Marvin, she said. Marvin didn't answer. How are you today, King Marvin? She asked. Casey had a ponytail that stuck out of the side of her head, not the back. Did you do your homework, King Marvin? Said Casey. I'm not King Marvin, Marvin snapped. I'm Prince Robert, he said. It felt right. I'm Prince Robert. He had never liked the name Marvin. Everyone was staring at him. Marvin? Asked Mrs. North. He stood up. My name is not Marvin, he said. I'm Prince Robert, the lost prince of Champagne. He knew in his bones it was true. He could feel his loyal blood swirling around inside him. I was kidnapped the day I was born, he said. I was just a baby, but I can remember now. The kidnappers hid me in a hospital. Mr. and Mrs. Redpost took me home from the hospital by mistake. You remember this? Asked Mrs. North. From when you were 1 day old? It's kind of a haze, Marvin admitted. I don't remember exactly what the kidnappers looked like. One of them had a black mustache. Marvin has red hair, said Stuart. Mr. and Mrs. Redpost have brown hair. How do you explain that? Asked Nick. Well, do any of your grandparents have red hair, Marvin? Asked Mrs. North. Marvin thought a moment. No, they all have gray hair, or else they're bald. And I'm left-handed. You said that meant I have royal blood. His teacher smiled. Well, let me ask you a question, Marvin. Excuse me, I mean Prince Robert. Whatever happened to the real Marvin Redpost? Huh? Said Marvin. 9 years ago, Mr. and Mrs. Redpost had a baby. You say they took you home from the hospital by mistake, after the kidnappers hid you in the hospital. What happened to their real baby? Some other parents took him home by mistake, suggested Nick. Then what about their baby? Asked Mrs. North. Other parents took him home, said Judy. So parents just keep taking home the wrong babies from the hospital? Asked Mrs. North. The real Marvin Redpost could have died, said Casey. But then the people in the hospital discovered they had this extra baby. So they gave it to Mr. and Mrs. Redpost. And that way, everybody was happy. Well, I suppose anything is possible, said Mrs. North. I watched the news last night, said Stuart. The King of Champagne was on. They gave a number to call. I wrote it down. Well, there you go, said Mrs. North. All you have to do is call that number. But at that moment, Marvin was feeling strangely sad. He was thinking about what Casey Hampton said. The real Marvin Redpost was dead. Chapter 5. The Duchess of Bathwater. So, where are you? Asked Clarence. Said Marvin. It was after school. He had just walked out of class with Nick and Stuart. He's a prince, said Nick. Marvin wished Nick hadn't said that. Clarence glared at Marvin. Marvin shrugged. I'm sorry I pushed you this morning, said Clarence. Huh? Said Marvin. Oh, well, that's okay. I don't mind. Clarence held out his hand. Marvin shook it. Huh? Laughed Nick. You're afraid Marvin will throw you in the dungeon. I wouldn't do that, Marvin told Clarence. He wished Nick would quit saying things that could make Clarence mad. Clarence looked at Marvin. Do you want a quarter? He asked. Marvin shook his head. Stuart elbowed him. Take it, Marvin, he whispered. Clarence pulled a quarter out of his pocket. Here, you can have it. No, that's okay, said Marvin. Take it, said Clarence. Marvin took it. Thanks, said Clarence. You're welcome, said Marvin. Clarence walked away. Nick and Stuart cracked up. Casey Hampton and Judy Jasper came out the door. Goodbye, Prince Marvin, said Casey. See you tomorrow, Prince, said Judy. The two girls ran away giggling. Marvin looked at the quarter. He wished Clarence hadn't given it to him. A quarter is nothing to a prince, said Stuart. Do you know how much your allowance is going to be? $100 a week? Guessed Nick. More, said Stuart. 1,000? Asked Marvin. Stuart shook his head. Then he said, Your weight in gold. Nick whistled. You should eat more, said Stuart. The more you weigh, the bigger your allowance. You could have 3 ice cream sundaes a day, said Nick. 4, said Stuart. 5, said Nick. 6, said Marvin. Come on, said Stuart. Let's go to your house and call up your father. Why? Asked Marvin. His father worked at an office in Washington, D.C. The king of Shampoo, said Stuart. Oh, my father, said Marvin. Duh, said Nick. They went to Marvin's house. He tapped the red post as he walked through the gate. They went straight to the phone in the kitchen. Stuart gave Marvin the number to call. Marvin looked at the phone. Don't you want to call him? Asked Stuart. Sure I do, said Marvin. He wasn't sure. Well, do it, said Nick. I will, Marvin said. Don't rush me. He picked up the phone. What are you going to say? Asked Nick. Marvin took a deep breath. Then dialed the number. Are you going to call him Dad? Asked Nick. A woman answered the phone. How may I direct your call, please? She asked. I would like to speak to His Royal Highness, the King of Shampoo, please, said Marvin. Oh, that's good, said Nick. I'm sorry, the king isn't here. May I help you? Said the woman. It's me, exclaimed Marvin. I'm the king's son, the one he's looking for. And your name? My name? Marvin smiled at Nick and Stuart. Prince Robert. The woman laughed. That may very well be, she said. However, we've received lots of calls. Do you go by a different name? Oh, said Marvin. Marvin Redpost. And when can you come in for your test? My test? Yes, a blood test. Oh, said Marvin. I was afraid I'd have to know the capital of shampoo or stuff like that. The woman laughed. No, it's not the kind of test, she said. Marvin liked the way the woman laughed. It sounded almost as if she was singing. How about 11 o'clock tomorrow? She asked. I have school, said Marvin. 4:30, asked the woman. Okay, said Marvin. She told him where to go for the test. It was at the Watergate Hotel in Washington, D.C., 5th floor. Excuse me? Are you my mother? Asked Marvin. What? The Queen? Asked Marvin. She laughed again. No, she said. She stopped. I'm Lady Jennifer, Duchess of Bathwater. Oh, said Marvin. Well, it was very nice talking to you, Lady Jennifer. It was nice talking to you, Marvin. I hope you really are Prince Robert. I like you. Marvin hung up the phone. Tomorrow at 4:30, he told his two best friends. Now all I have to do is get my mom to take me there.